Welcome gamers to Mini Fights. Today we've got a third-person filmed game between Gabe and Paulie. They're both playing Avengers and both have actually pretty similar lists, so we're going to decide right now that Paulie is a Skrull agent. Paulie's vision goes into phased mode, and the Skrull Captain America advances forward, scooping up one of the hammers, and uses his second action to walk and take cover behind the size 3 Hydra light tank. The true Captain America also advances forward, aiming for the left side extremist console and the hammer. Now, all of the points of interest in this mission, all of the objectives and extraction objects are all in the same location, so there's essentially 4 hammers sitting on top of 4 consoles in a diamond shape around the table. The Skrull android Vision moves forward, getting within range 2 of Skrull Thor. Scoops up Thor under his arms and flies him over to within range 2 of Cap and standing on the extremist console objective. And as the Prince of Asgard lands, he unleashes a devastating blow to Cap, dealing enough damage to daze him in one hit. Cap drops the hammer on the ground next to Vision, but Vision does not have enough power to pick it up. The real Thor isn't going to let this lie. He advances forward and then uses 4 Asgard to charge, quote-unquote, into Skrull Thor. Skrull Thor has a pretty good defense roll, but real Thor does end up dealing a point of damage to him, which is critical, because that's going to put stagger on him. Real Thor picks up the hammer that was next to Vision and ends his activation. Skrull Thor cries for Skrull Asgard, charges over the pile of guys there and the dumpster, gets behind the real Thor. You can tell Skrull Thor by his glowing blue lightning coming off of his hammer. He takes a swing there using the 4 Asgard attack, deals 1 point of damage to Gabe's Thor, which is going to deal stagger to him. He then picks up the Hydra light tank with strongest Avengers there is and throws it at the real deal Thor. This is going to end up doing another point of damage total. Gabe Shuri activates, advances forward next to the console and hammer, declines to pick the hammer up, but does use her Panther Gauntlets to fire at the Skrull Captain America. This deals a point of damage to him, naturally, and pushes him back. Skrull Okoye advances to stand in front of the extremist console on Paulie's side of the table. You can just see it sticking out behind that Coke machine there. The Winter Soldier advances, stands next to the console, picks up the hammer, holding it in his metal arm, and with his free hand, fires off his assault rifle at the Skrull Thor. This ends up doing pretty good damage. It does 2 damage, and it applies bleed. The Imposter Shuri advances to the extremist console, but after some deliberation, Paulie decides to advance her further forward, taking cover behind this dumpster. Gabe's Valk advances, and advances again, and of course scoops up a hammer like a good Asgardian would. She's also standing on the extremist console on that side of the table. And that ends the round. Pretty interesting so far. I feel like Paulie has done a lot more damage than Gabe, but Gabe is up now 5-2 because he has 3 hammers and 2 consoles, and Paulie only has 1 console and 1 hammer. Skrull Vision starts to turn in dense mode, and Skrull Thor activates. He immediately picks up this dumpster, smashes it down on the real Thor, dealing 2 points of damage. He then advances over the various models in the way and strikes Thor. However, Cap decides, despite the terrible damage he took last time, to bodyguard this, uses Vibranium Shield, and I can do this all day, and takes no damage. However, he does get pushed away, pavement of the parking lot, but retaining his footing. Skrull Thor uses his last action to swing on the true Thor, and ends up dealing no damage. Gabe's Thor begins his activation by throwing a tank at Vision. These are size 3 tanks, so this ends up dealing 3 points of damage after Vision only rolls 1 dodge. And apologies here, I didn't capture the movement, but Thor moves to that point he's at now using 4 Asgard. He does a 4 Asgard swing into Skrull Thor, does a point of damage to him, throws him into Vision, which likely would have killed Vision, but Paulie does the correct thing here and uses Brace for impact. This probably saves Vision from getting dazed, and it definitely saves Thor, who only has 1 HP remaining. So Skrull Android Vision opens up with a solar beam on both Thor and Cap. Paulie decides to go after Thor first, and Cap bodyguards it. This ends up dealing no damage, but essentially means that the beam is going to hit Cap twice and Thor none times. So here's the second one on Cap. Paulie rolls a ton of crits. Cap doesn't roll great on his defense roll and ends up taking 4 damage. Vision, after some deliberation, decides to do it again. Cap bodyguards again. But the extreme power of this solar flare bursting out of Vision's forehead, this fake Skrull Vision, who maybe is even more powerful than the real Vision, who knows? Who knows who the real Vision is here anymore? Nukes Cap. Vision ends his activation by picking up a light post and breaking it over Thor's head, dazing him as well. What an activation. Amazing. The cherry on top is, of course, picking up the hammer. With some desperation, the good guys see this Vision just glowing in energy, and they know they need to get him away from them a little bit. Shuri advances forward, Panther Gauntlets pulses at Vision, ends up dealing a point of damage to him, but more critically, backing him up a little bit, making sure that he's not going to have another turn where he gets to double beam attack. The Skrull Captain America advances forward, getting within range 2 of his friendly Thor, and he throws his shield at Shuri. This is going to deal a point of damage to her, ricochet in a Winter Soldier, and deal a point of damage to him as well. Bucky slowly walks forward, full of sadness, tear rolling down his cheek over his lost friend. He decides to take some vengeance on these Skrull jerks. Fires his assault rifle with the hammer buff at Shuri, and after some rerolls from the friendly real Shuri, this deals 3 damage and a bleed condition to the Skrull. The Skrull Okoye advances away from the Extremis console, gets within range 4 to unleash a energy blast from her spear at Valkyrie. After a couple Shuri rerolls and some other stuff, this is going to end up dealing 1 point of damage. Back to Gabe, his Valk is going to charge into Okoye, and she does her strike attack, which I don't recall if it's called strike or dragon's fang, swords, whatever. She must have left the good swords at home. She dealt no damage with that attack, and the second attack also deals no damage, and that's Valkyrie. Paulie Shuri advances kind of towards that console, but instead of walking fully to the console, she decides to Panther Gauntlets Winter Soldier, who is securing his own console on his side. This ends up dealing no damage, but that really wasn't the intent anyway. The intent was, of course, to push him off of that victory point, giving secure objective, which it does. Before Paulie ends her activation, he uses the Avengers Assemble Tactics card, and after some deliberation, he ends up just moving Vision forward. And we'll get into that in a minute of why that kind of played out that way. And that is going to be the end of the round. So as the players clean up here, we'll talk about that Avengers Assemble. Paulie did not realize that it would not apply to Shuri. So his intent was to put Okoye and Shuri both back on their respective consoles, which would have scored him 2 additional VPs. So he kind of made it a whole turn around the idea that he was going to be able to move them again, and obviously that's not legal, so he can't do that. You really can't undo it at this step of the game, so just an unfortunate thing he had to eat, but it would be a tie game here if the game worked the way he thought it did. But unfortunately it doesn't, and we're going in round 3. And round 3 begins immediately with Gabe activating Thor and using advanced R&D to push 3 power from Winter Soldier to those remaining 3 characters, which are Thor, Valk, and Shuri. Thor then uses 4 Asgard to charge into Cap, and Cap uses Vibranium Shield to enhance his defense. This ends up dealing no damage at all to Cap. After a little bit of decision making, Thor just throws Cap into Vision, who, even though he has bad throw defense, rolls 2 successes and only takes a damage. Thor then uses his last action to strike Cap. This ends up killing Cap by throwing him into Vision, or I should say dazing Cap. And the collision damage with Vision also dazes him as well. 2 hammers hit the ground, Thor scoops them both up, and that ends a huge activation for the good guys. Back to the Skrulls, Skrull Okoye lines up a Vibranium Spear Thrust on Valkyrie. This first swing, after a couple rerolls from Shuri, ends up triggering a flurry and a pierce, dealing a point of damage. Then the strike, the free strike from Flurry, deals 3 points of damage to Valk, leaving her on 1. Paulie then advance R&Ds a power from Shuri to Okoye. That's going to give him enough so he's got 4, so he can do it again, just to make sure he finishes Valk off, which he does so. Doesn't need the to proc Flurry and do another attack. However, he is completely out of power, and he cannot pick up this hammer that Valk drops right next to Shuri. Winter Soldier advances forward in a tactical position with his assault rifle forward, lights up Shuri, ends up dealing the last point of damage needed to daze her, and ends his activation. And everything is basically dead already. This is going to be a short round. And back to Paulie. His Skrull Thor feels the moment and decides to use Doom Prophecy. Now, Doom Prophecy is a tactics card we haven't used a whole lot on this YouTube channel so far. What it's going to do is basically make his defense terrible for the rest of the game against physical, but add 4 dice to his physical attacks. Adds his physical defense to it. He throws a hammer at Shuri, hoping to one-shot her. Unfortunately, only deals 3 points of damage and shock to her, which is going to leave her on 1 HP. So this was a gamble on Paulie's part. He had stagger, so he only got 1 action, and he had bleed. So he is going to drop dead after this throw, which did not, unfortunately, succeed in knocking Shuri out. So last activation is the 1 stamina remaining Shuri on the Avengers side. She advances forward and takes a shot at Okoye. I kind of missed the die roll here, but long story short, it deals a point of damage and pushes her back. That's going to end the round, and Gabe is going to score 4 VPs, 3 hammers and a console, and unfortunately, Paulie's not going to get any. And we're going into round 4, and things are looking a little worse for Paulie now. He was up early, and the VPs didn't really come along with the attritional advantage he had, and now he's maybe in a little bit of trouble here. Well, the round's going to open up with a shocking turn of events. A Thor is going to activate first. Skrull Thor does a 4 Skrull Asgard into the real Thor. Deals a point of damage, and is of course going to stagger him because of that damage. Even after a few Shuri rerolls, 1 manages to get through. And with the second action, he strikes Thor again, this time putting 2 damage through and triggering the throw. The mighty Skrull Chad is not done. He decides to pick up Shuri and hurl him into the legitimate Thor. This is going to deal the last point of stamina remaining for Shuri, and it deals also a point of damage to Thor. Shuri's lucky though, because Winter Soldier has her back. He uses the superpower to take an assault rifle shot at the Skrull Thor, dealing no damage, but applying the bleed condition to him. Thor decides to 4 Asgard forward and strikes Captain America. Cap takes it on his Vibranium Shield, taking a total of 1 damage, which is enough to stagger him. He then throws the Imposter Thor into a Jersey barrier, dealing 1 point of damage, and ends his activation as he had to shake stagger with his first action point. Skrull Shuri powers up her Panther Gauntlets and unleashes a sonic blast on Valkyrie. This is going to deal 3 points of damage and stun, but just misses the stagger. She then Panther Gauntlets, just the standard attack that does 1 damage to her. Of course, it does a damage, and it pushes her. Polly elects to kind of shove her into this dumpster and leave her there. Shuri then picks up the hammer and ends her activation. Valkyrie is very powered up. I think she has 10 at this point, and she's real pissed. So she charges Shuri, gets within one of the Extremis console, and uses a Warrior of Legend Dragon Fang. This is going to do a total of 3 damage to her, after a bunch of crits get turned into hits and all kinds of other zany stuff. She uses her second action point to take a regular strike, but still empowered by Warrior of Legend. He rolls a bunch more crits, and it is plenty enough to just kill Shuri outright. Shuri's going to drop the hammer, die, and Valk, of course, scoops the hammer up. And before Gabe ends his turn, he's going to pop Avengers Assemble, using it just to move Thor towards the center there. Skrull Cap activates and throws his Skrullvanium shield at Thor and deals no damage. That was his whole activation because he had to shake Stagger. Gabe activates Winter Soldier, puts Doom Prophecy on him, and shoots a extremely high number of dice at Thor. Polly rolled dice here, but those don't count because he had also Doom Prophecy himself. And Thor takes 5 points. Skrull Thor takes 5 points of damage from that. Winter Soldier then advances off the console and heals Good Guy Thor for 4 by spending 5. The card costs 1 more because he's holding a hammer. Skrull Okoye levels her Spirit Valk and unleashes some energy from it. This deals 2 damage, which is enough to just straight out kill Valk, and she drops the hammer. Okoye stalks over and picks the hammer up, taking vengeance for her fake friend. Her real friend? I don't know. Her Skrull's convinced that they're actually the superhero they're faking. I think they are. Anyway, she's got a hammer. Speaking of hammers, the Vision flies to the center of the table and unleashes Synthezoid Avenger on the real Thor. This deals 4 points of damage. He then picks up a car and hurls it at him, dealing another 2. If Gabe hadn't healed him earlier with patch-up, he would be really dead. But he's alive with 2 HP remaining. And that wraps up round 4. And yet another round where on the board it looks like Paulie's doing pretty well, but the scoreboard is not reflecting it. He goes to 6, Gabe goes to 14. So as we go into round 5, really the only win condition for Paulie is to table Gabe. With the power of positive thinking, Skrull domination, and never giving up, I think Paulie's still got a chance in this one. Let's see how this round 5 shapes up. The round begins with the real Thor, covered in blood and wounds, only 2 stamina remaining, beautiful permed blonde hair, blowing in the wind, hurling Skrull Thor in a vision and killing him. He then 4 Asgards into Captain America, Skrull Captain America, and wails on his vibranium shield. This deals another damage, and more critically throws him into vision, dealing another point of damage to each. He strikes Captain America 1 more time, dealing no damage, but again throwing him into vision, killing both, and effectively ending the game. At this point, Paulie concedes because it's over. All he's got left is Okoye. He's down in a huge hole on VPs. Great game out of both players. And, let's get into a little post-mortem here for a second. So, I think there's a couple swing points in this one. I was trying to kind of retroactively figure out where it went wrong for Paulie. I think Gabe, generally speaking, played a pretty clean game. There's a couple maybe minor things I might have done differently in retrospect, but I don't think he made any egregious errors. Paulie, there's a couple things. I think the primary thing was the Avengers Assembled blooper was a big one. And that's one of those things where he won't make that mistake again. He just didn't know. But it put him in a 2 VP hole. The Doom Prophecy on Thor ultimately, I think, was the real killer and the thing that ended his game for him. It didn't provide nearly enough value, and it made his Thor extra killable. And in the Thor v Thor battle, whoever loses their Thor first is likely going to lose the game, all other things considered equal. So, good learning points for Paulie. I think that was kind of a couple things that he hadn't really seen before in the game, sort of hitting him at once. he'll know for next time. But awesome job from both players. Gabe played a great clean game and dug himself out of an attrition hole that was pretty bad. And one more final thought for this particular battle report. This is the last one that we recorded at the game store before the coronavirus pandemic has hit the world and changed all our lives here in the short term. Like a lot of you, I really miss my pals. I miss gaming. I miss hanging out with my chums and playing games and recording games and memeing around and just having a good time. I know a lot of you have a lot more hardships in your lives than just that, but I'm hoping to anybody who's watching this that this can at least add a little joy and a little distraction to your lives during these hard times. Thanks so much for watching. Take care of yourselves and your families. See you next week.